Dear listeners, imagine for a moment. A small boy walks alone through a dark and soaking forest. His clothes are torn, his bare feet bleed, and his ribs show beneath his thin shirt. The rain falls without mercy, soaking him to the bone. In the distance, lightning strikes a tree, setting it ablaze for just a moment before the fire is swallowed by the storm. The boy does not scream. He does not cry. But in his eyes, there is a sorrow so deep it cannot be named. He collapses beneath a giant tree with roots hanging like twisted ropes, shivering, weak, and alone. No one is coming. No one ever has. And yet, from behind the wet leaves, something strange calls his name. What is it that lives in the depths of this forest? And why has it chosen to speak to a poor orphan child on a night like this? But before we continue the story, please support this channel by liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Your support means the world to us and gives us the spirit to keep sharing more powerful stories. Oh, and don't forget to check in down in the comments. Let us know where you're listening from. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Now let's begin the story. His name was Arden. He was just 9 years old when the world abandoned him. His father drowned during a river flood while fishing. His mother died a few months later, her body weakened by a fever that no medicine could cure. Since then, Arden had been completely alone. His tiny house near the forest had collapsed. The villagers no longer came near him. They believed the forest behind his home was cursed. They were afraid. But Arden had nowhere else to go. Every day he scavenged for food. Sometimes he stole fallen fruit, sometimes he dug for roots. He never spoke to anyone. No one spoke to him. It was as if the world had decided he didn't exist. Then, one stormy afternoon, when the skies turned black and the rain began to fall in sheets, Arden stepped into the forest. Deeper than he had ever gone. Hunger burned in his belly, and his vision blurred from exhaustion. His feet slipped on wet leaves, but he kept walking. The trees thickened, and the shadows grew heavier. That's when he saw it. A massive, ancient banyan tree stood before him, its roots coiled like sleeping snakes. Strangely, the ground beneath it was dry, untouched by the rain. A soft light filtered down through the leaves, golden and warm. Arden crawled beneath the tree and collapsed, too tired to be afraid. Then he heard a voice. "Why are you crying, little human?" Arden sat up, eyes wide. He looked around. No one. "I'm up here," the voice said again. And there, perched on a thick branch, was a monkey with golden fur and intelligent human-like eyes. "Who are you?" Arden asked, barely able to speak. "My name is Rimba," the monkey replied. "And I've been watching you." Arden didn't run. Something about Rimba's voice calmed his fear. It was warm. Familiar almost. "I didn't mean to come here. I was just hungry," Arden said, his voice trembling. Rimba climbed down slowly and placed a gentle paw on the boy's shoulder. Then he whispered something in an old, mysterious language. The words wrapped around Arden like music, like a lullaby from a forgotten time. "Sleep beneath this tree tonight," Rimba said softly. "Tomorrow, your world will never be the same." And that night, Arden fell asleep under the ancient roots of the banyan tree, in a forest everyone feared, beside a creature he had never known, but who felt more human than anyone he had ever met. The next morning, sunlight danced between the leaves, warm and golden. Arden opened his eyes and felt different. He was no longer afraid. He was no longer hungry. For the first time in his life he felt peace. Birds chirped above him. But this time their voices were more than sounds. "There are ripe fruits to the east. Watch out, there's a snake in the bushes." He could understand them. Not just the birds but the squirrels, the ants, even the rustling trees. They were speaking, and Arden understood every word. He looked down at his hands, then up at the tree. Rimba was still there, watching from the branch above. "You can hear them now, can't you?" Rimba said. I understand them," Arden whispered. "That is my gift," Rimba said. "A gift for a child who has never been heard, but who listens deeper than anyone else." Arden didn't know whether to cry or smile. The forest that once seemed so frightening now felt like home. But Rimba looked to the north, toward the village, toward the humans who had never cared for Arden. "Humans do not love what they cannot understand," Rimba warned. "You must never tell them about this." Arden nodded. He knew. The human world and the forest were not meant to mix. But he didn't yet understand that one day, he would be forced to choose between them, and that choice would change everything. The days that followed were unlike anything Arden had ever known. From the moment he awoke beneath the great banyan tree, everything around him felt alive, not just in body but in thought, in intention, in soul. He moved through the forest as if it were an ancient village, with each creature a neighbor, each tree a teacher, and every whisper in the wind a story meant only for him. The birds became his messengers. They would fly above and return with news from distant parts of the forest. "Rain will fall by sunset," one of them told him. "Wild boars have passed through the southern ridge," another warned. The squirrels, once shy and jumpy, now offered him small bundles of nuts, sometimes even guiding him to hidden trees where the sweetest fruits grew. Even the ants, so small and silent, marched in patterns that spoke of underground water sources or nearby danger. And through it all Rimba watched. The golden-furred monkey never stayed in one place for too long. Sometimes he sat in the branches above, silent and thoughtful. Other times, he joined Arden on long walks, leaping from tree to tree as he taught him about the forest's secrets. "Do you feel the roots beneath your feet?" Rimba asked one day, as they crossed a patch of soft moss. Arden paused and closed his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "They're humming." "Exactly," Rimba said. "The forest speaks not only through voices but through silence, movement, even the shape of the shadows. It's a language older than your people, older than mine." Arden wanted to know everything. His hunger for knowledge now was stronger than his past hunger for food. And the forest, alive, wise, and infinite, answered him. But though his days were filled with wonder, his nights still carried the ache of loneliness. There was no one who looked like him, no other child to speak with. The animals understood him, but they did not understand pain the way humans did. One night, as he lay under the stars, Arden asked Rimba a question he had never dared before. "Why me?" Rimba was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the moon. "Because you were forgotten," he finally said. "The forest remembers those who are forgotten." Arden didn't reply. He turned on his side, trying to hold back tears. The forest had become his family. But part of him still longed for a human voice, a hand to hold, someone who knew his name before the world forgot it. The next morning everything changed. Arden had wandered farther than usual. He followed a red-winged bird that promised to show him a stream filled with fat river fish. They walked for hours, deeper into a part of the forest that even Rimba had warned him about. The trees here were taller, older, and the air smelled of copper and thyme. The bird flew ahead, chirping excitedly. Arden followed, but he soon noticed something was wrong. The trees no longer spoke. The wind did not whisper. The leaves were still, completely still. And then he heard it, a sound not from the forest. Machine. The loud, grinding roar of a chainsaw echoed through the trees. Arden froze. He moved slowly, crouching low, until he reached a ridge and looked down into a clearing. There, standing beside a group of men in helmets and uniforms, was the village chief, Mr. Darmo. The same man who had once told Arden to leave when he tried to beg for food. Now he stood with arms crossed, smiling proudly, as the machines tore into the earth. Giant metal claws dug into the ground. Chainsaws screamed as they sliced through ancient trunks. Trees that had stood for hundreds of years fell like matchsticks. Birds scattered, monkeys howled in terror, and the earth trembled. Arden's hands clenched into fists. He turned and ran. Back through the dead silence, past the frightened animals, past the stunned trees that could not speak. When he reached the banyan tree, Rimba was waiting. "They've come," Arden gasped, breathless. "They're cutting everything down." "I know," Rimba said, his voice heavy. "The forest felt their footsteps before you did." "We have to stop them," Arden cried. "We can't let them destroy this place." Rimba looked at him with ancient eyes. "Do you remember what I told you?" Arden nodded. "I must not reveal the gift. Humans do not accept what they do not understand." "Then you know the danger," Rimba said. "If they see what you are, they will not thank you. They will fear you. They may try to silence you." Arden fell to his knees. "But I can't just watch. I can't stay quiet." The forest around them listened. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "Then you must choose," Rimba said softly. "To remain hidden and safe, or to step into their world and speak, knowing the world may not want to hear." That night Arden could not sleep. He sat by the roots of the banyan tree, staring into the dark. The sounds of chainsaws echoed in his head. He thought of the birds' nests torn apart, the squirrels' trees falling, the silence in the trees where once there was music. He thought of his mother's face, blurry in his memory, and the song she used to hum. The forest had saved him. Now he had to save it. But how? He was just a boy. No one listened to boys. Especially boys with no name, no family, no home. Ugh. He used the very thing that made him different. The next morning, Arden rose before the sun. Rimba watched him quietly. "I'm going," Arden said. Rimba did not stop him. But as Arden turned to leave, the monkey spoke one final time. "Remember, Arden, the voice you carry now is not just yours. It belongs to every creature that breathes in this forest. Speak it wisely. Speak it with courage." And with that, Arden stepped beyond the trees, back toward the world that had forgotten him, toward the village that had once thrown him out, toward the men with machines. And he carried with him not just words, but the voice of the forest itself. Arden did not walk like a boy returning home. He walked like someone rising from the ruins of his past, carrying a storm that had been silent for too long. His feet touched the earth softly, but his steps were firm. With every breath, he felt the weight of thousands of voices, birdsong, rustling leaves, frightened whispers of deer, and the ancient hum of the trees, all rising inside him like a tide. He knew the way back to the village. The road was etched into his memory like a scar. It was the same path he had taken years ago when he left with no food, no shoes, and no goodbyes. Now he returned not as a beggar, but as a messenger. But no one in the village was ready to hear the message. When he reached the edge of the fields, the first to see him was a group of children playing near the rice paddies. One of them pointed. They all stared. One of the older boys shouted, "Isn't that the forest child?" Another boy laughed. "I thought he died." Arden didn't stop. He kept walking through the narrow alleys. The mud clung to his feet, and the air smelled of smoke and wet hay. Doors creaked open. Faces peeked through windows. One by one they recognized him. The orphan, the cursed boy, the one who used to sleep near the goat pen. By the time he reached the center of the village, a crowd had gathered. Mr. Darmo stepped forward, arms folded across his chest. He looked Arden up and down with narrowed eyes. "You dare show your face here," he said coldly. "What do you want?" Arden looked around. So many familiar faces. So many mouths that had once whispered cruel things about him. He felt the fear returning, pressing at his chest, tightening around his throat. But then, he remembered the banyan tree. Rimba's voice. The songs of the forest. "I came to speak," Arden said clearly. Mr. Darmo scoffed. "You've been living with animals. You've gone mad." Arden raised his head. "The forest is being destroyed. You know it. You led them there. We're building a better future," Mr. Darmo snapped. "That forest is full of monsters and curses. We're cutting it down so our children can live safely." "Monsters." Arden's voice rose. "The real monsters are the ones who destroy what they never tried to understand." The villagers murmured. Some looked uneasy. Others laughed nervously. A woman stepped forward. Her name was Mira, the mother of 3 young children. She had once given Arden a piece of bread when no one else dared. "What did you see in the forest, Arden?" she asked gently. Arden looked her in the eyes. Then he did something no one expected. He whistled. A bird landed on his shoulder. A bright blue one with feathers like polished glass. Chirped once, then twice, and Arden answered in its own language. The bird replied. Then a second one joined, followed by a third. From the trees at the edge of the village, a quiet wave of wings fluttered as dozens of birds arrived, perching on rooftops, fences, arms. The villagers gasped. Arden turned toward the goat pen. A small squirrel climbed over the gate and scurried to his feet. Behind it came a pair of deer, timid but calm. From the bushes, even a fox emerged, stepping into the open. Mr. Darmo stepped back. "Witchcraft," he whispered. "It's not witchcraft," Arden said. "It's a gift. One I didn't ask for. One I didn't even want. But I carry it because the forest gave me a home when none of you would." "You expect us to believe you can talk to animals?" another elder asked. "I don't care if you believe me," Arden said. "But I came to warn you. If you destroy the forest, you destroy yourselves. The rivers will dry. The storms will grow stronger. The land will grow angry." "Angry?" Mr. Darmo sneered. "Trees don't feel anger. Rivers don't care. You've been listening to fairy tales." Arden took a deep breath. "I was like you. I thought the world was silent. But it's not. Screaming. You just stopped listening." The elders began to argue. Some demanded Arden be chased away. Others were shaken by the animal's presence, by the calmness that had taken over the square. It was then that Grandmother Sari stepped forward. She was the oldest in the village, her hair white as clouds, her hands shaking from age. She hadn't spoken in years. But now she walked slowly toward Arden, eyes locked on his. She touched his cheek. "I remember your mother," she said, her voice cracked like dried leaves. "She came from the forest. She knew its songs. She warned us once long ago, but we did not listen." Mr. Darmo stiffened. "Grandmother, with all respect." "Silence," she snapped, stronger than anyone expected. "You closed your ears to the wind. You burned the roots beneath your feet. And now the forest speaks through this child." She turned to the crowd. "Listen to him. But fear is not so easily undone. Later that night, Arden sat by the edge of the village, watching the sun set behind the mountains. He had spoken. Some had heard. But others, like Mr. Darmo, still planned to continue the destruction. Rimba appeared beside him, stepping from the shadows like mist. "You did well," he said softly. "I don't know if it's enough," Arden whispered. "Few ever do," Rimba replied. "But you planted doubt. Doubt grows roots, sometimes stronger than belief." They sat in silence. Then a noise came from the edge of the forest. Scream. Then another. Arden stood, heart pounding. Villagers came running. Flames glowed behind them. A machine had exploded. Trees had moved, bent and broke in unnatural ways. The forest had awakened. It had heard Arden's voice. And now it was answering. The screams tore through the night like knives, sharp and sudden. Panic flooded the village as the orange glow of fire lit up the sky from the forest's edge. Mothers clutched their children. Men grabbed machetes. Chickens ran wild. The elders shouted over one another, trying to calm the chaos, but no one was listening. Arden stood frozen at the top of the hill, watching it all unfold. The machines were burning, engulfed in flames that seemed to crawl unnaturally fast across metal and rubber. Thick black smoke curled toward the stars. He could feel the ground humming beneath his feet, like the slow heartbeat of something ancient rising from the earth. Rimba appeared beside him, silent, his golden fur flickering under the firelight. "They didn't listen," Arden whispered. "No," Rimba replied. "And now the forest is no longer asking." Down near the machines, men were trying to put out the flames, but the water from their buckets hissed uselessly into the heat. One man, soaked in sweat and soot, pointed at a fallen tree and shouted something about the roots moving. Another swore he saw vines wrap around his ankles and pull. In the confusion, a towering tree near the excavation site creaked, then split in half, not from fire or blade, but from within. As it cracked open, a gust of wind surged outward like a wave. The villagers who had come to watch stumbled back. Some fell. Others ran. And there, rising from the heart of the forest, was a wall of trees, branches intertwined like arms locked in protest. They were growing faster than nature allowed. Leaves unfolded in seconds. Roots burst through soil. It was not random. It was deliberate. The forest was building a barrier, sealing itself off. Mr. Darmo stood among the stunned crowd, his mouth open, his shirt soaked with sweat. He pointed at Arden. "You did this." "I only warned you," Arden replied, stepping forward. "I told you the forest was alive." "It's a trick," Mr. Darmo snarled. Some demon magic you've brought from those cursed woods." "The only curse here is your greed," Grandmother Sari said, stepping out of the crowd. Her walking stick struck the ground as she moved. "You ignored the warnings. You took without giving. You mocked what you could not understand." But Mr. Darmo wasn't listening. Rage had consumed him. He grabbed a burning stick and marched toward Arden, eyes wild. "I should have left you to die back then," he hissed. Before he could reach him, the ground between them erupted. Thick roots shot upward, twisting into a barricade. Mr. Darmo stumbled back, barely missing the growing tangle. Behind the root wall, dozens of glowing eyes stared from the darkness. Wolves, foxes, wolves. Even a panther, its fur black as night, stood silently watching. They didn't growl. They didn't blink. They simply stared, as if judging every heart in the village one by one. The villagers stepped back in fear. Arden, trembling but unyielding, stood his ground. "Rimba," he whispered, What is the forest going to do? Rimba didn't answer immediately. His eyes reflected the flames, but his face remained calm. It depends, he said at last, on whether humans remember how to listen. The next morning, silence ruled the village. The fire had burned itself out. The machines were nothing but twisted metal. The tree wall still stood, alive and unmoving like a silent warning. And the path into the heart of the forest was gone. No one dared approach it. Arden sat near the fields, alone. The villagers kept their distance. Some believed he was cursed. Others now looked at him with something deeper than fear, something close to guilt. They whispered, but not as loudly as before. Children, once told to stay away from him, now watched him with wide eyes. One little girl approached slowly and placed a small flower beside him before running back to her mother. Rimba, perched nearby on a stone, observed quietly. "Are they afraid of me now?" Arden asked. "No," Rimba replied. "They are afraid of themselves." You held up a mirror, Arden. What they saw terrified them. That night, the villagers gathered for a meeting. Grandmother Sari sat at the center, wrapped in her old shawl, her hands folded in her lap. Mr. Darmo was there too. His pride cracked but not yet broken. He said little. His voice, once loud and commanding, was reduced to silence. Arden stood at the edge of the circle, waiting to be called. For a long time no one said anything. Then, Grandmother Sari lifted her head. "The forest has shut its doors," she said. "The damage we've done cannot be undone with words." One of the farmers, a man named Pak Rendi, raised his hand. "What do we do now? Our water comes from the forest streams. Our soil depends on those trees. Then we must learn to give," Grandmother Sari replied, "as the forest once gave to us." "But it won't open for us anymore," Pak Rendi said. Grandmother Sari turned her eyes to Arden. "It might, for him." All eyes shifted. Arden felt the pressure like a stone pressing on his chest. He didn't want power. He didn't want to be a leader. He only wanted to protect the place that had saved him. "I can't promise the forest will forgive," Arden said. "But I'll speak to it. I'll try." Mr. Darmo stood slowly. "You expect us to bow to a child?" "No," Arden said. "You're not bowing to me. You're bowing to the life you once forgot." The next morning, Arden walked to the forest's edge alone. Behind him, a quiet line of villagers followed, holding baskets of food, jars of water, bundles of seeds, gifts. Not offerings of fear but of hope. When Arden reached the wall of trees, he placed his hand on the bark. It was warm, alive. He closed his eyes and whispered, not in words but in feeling, a song from his soul, a memory of pain, of hunger, of love, and of belonging. The forest listened. Leaves rustled. Wind stirred. And then, a small opening appeared between the roots. Enough for a boy. Or perhaps, enough for a second chance. The opening in the tree wall was narrow, barely wide enough for Arden's small frame. The villagers watched in complete silence as he stepped through it. No one followed. No one dared. For them, this was a moment suspended between guilt and redemption, between the echoes of what they had destroyed and the fragile hope of what might still be saved. As Arden entered, the forest changed. It wasn't just the smell of damp earth and moss, or the coolness of the air after the fire. It was something deeper. The trees no longer felt like friends whispering kindly. They felt like sentinels standing in judgment. Their leaves moved not in dance but in rhythm, as if keeping time with something unseen. Every step he took was met with silence. No bird called. No insect buzzed. Not even the rustle of a squirrel in the underbrush. Arden felt like he was walking through a cathedral made of wood and memory, where every branch carried the pain of the forest, where every root remembered the sting of chainsaws and fire. He passed the place where the stream once flowed. It had thinned to a trickle, barely enough to wet his fingers. Nearby, the stumps of ancient trees stood like gravestones. He knelt beside one of them, placing his hand on its rough surface. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I couldn't stop them in time." Behind him, he heard a soft sound. A step. Rimba approached, slow and solemn. "This part of the forest has gone quiet," the monkey said. "It's where the pain is loudest." Arden didn't look up. "They want to help now. They brought gifts. Eat. Water." "The forest does not need their gifts," Rimba replied. "It needs their truth." Arden stood. "Then I'll bring it. Even if they don't want to speak it, I will." They walked together through the heart of the damage, where blackened soil still smoldered in places, and the air tasted of ash. But further in, something shifted. Breeze. A single bird call. A flicker of green among the ruin. There, where once a tree had fallen, a sapling now stood. Fragile, but alive. Rimba pointed. "The forest is listening." Arden crouched beside the sapling and began to dig, not to remove it, but to shape the soil around it to protect its roots. His hands were soon covered in mud. He didn't care. He worked slowly, carefully, like one mending something sacred. And as he worked, a whisper floated to him. Not from Rimba. Not from the animals. From the forest itself. Not words but emotion. Curiosity. Sadness. And something else. The faintest thread of forgiveness. Arden stood, tears mixing with dirt on his cheeks. "I heard it," he said softly. Rimba nodded. "You always do." They returned to the edge of the forest as the sun began to set. The villagers were still there, still waiting. Grandmother Sari sat on a woven mat, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. Mr. Darmo stood far behind, arms crossed but face no longer defiant, just tired. Arden stepped out and everyone leaned forward. "The forest is not angry anymore," he said. "But it remembers everything." He turned to Mr. Darmo. "It remembers the machines. The fire. The silence." Mr. Darmo opened his mouth, but no words came. "It won't open its heart again unless you open yours," Arden continued. "Not just with gifts. With honesty. With sorrow." He pointed at the baskets. "Seeds won't grow unless the hands that plant them are clean." The silence hung heavy. Then Grandmother Sari spoke. "Let the boy lead." One by one, the villagers stepped forward. Mira came first, tears in her eyes. She placed her jar of clean water at Arden's feet and knelt. "For my children," she said. "And their children." Pak Rendi followed with a bundle of rice seeds. "For the rains we once took for granted," he whispered. Even the children brought small offerings. Wildflowers, drawings, stones painted with colors. But Mr. Darmo remained still. Arden turned to him. "Don't do it for me," he said. "Do it because you've heard the silence too." For a long time Mr. Darmo said nothing. Then, slowly he walked forward. He knelt. Not for the boy. Not for the monkey. But for the forest. "I was wrong," he said. No one clapped. No one cheered. The moment was too sacred for noise. That night, the villagers did not return home. They stayed at the edge of the forest, lighting small lanterns, sitting in quiet circles. No one gave speeches. No one sang. They simply waited, hearts open. And the forest watched. The next morning the first miracle happened. The birds returned. They came in flocks, bright feathers slicing through the morning sky. Their voices were soft at first, then louder, braver. The village awoke to color and sound they hadn't heard in weeks. Children laughed. Even elders smiled. The stream near the fields began to flow again, slow but steady. The soil smelled rich. And from the forest, a single deer emerged. It walked past Arden, past Rimba, and into the fields, grazing peacefully. No one moved. No one dared. The wall of trees still stood, but now there were gaps. Not open doors, not yet, but windows, invitations, possibilities. Rimba looked at Arden. They're learning. It's only the beginning, Arden said. And he was right. The forest would not forget. But perhaps now it might learn to trust again. If the humans could truly change. The forest began to breathe again. Over the next several days, life stirred in places once silenced by fire and blade. Small green shoots peeked through scorched earth. Birds built new nests in the lower branches. Squirrels returned to hollows long abandoned. And every morning, Arden would wake before sunrise and walk among the trees, listening, observing, speaking softly to the leaves and roots as if offering comfort to wounded friends. Villagers slowly began following him, not out of curiosity, but out of reverence. They came not with axes or saws, but with hands ready to plant. Some brought tools to clean the blackened debris. Others offered compost or water in clay jars. Even the children helped, dragging baskets of seeds or clearing stones from new garden beds. For the first time in memory, the edge of the forest became a place of cooperation, not conflict. But far beyond the village, downriver past the hills, there were others who had different plans. A group of developers in the nearby town, men in pressed shirts and polished shoes, had been watching the land for months. They were the ones who had supplied the heavy machines that Mr. Darmo once brought into the forest. They had drawn maps, marked areas for roads, dreamed of resorts and plantations. When news reached them that the machines were lost and the forest sealed, they didn't see it as a mystery. They saw it as resistance. An obstacle to be removed. One of them, a man named Bakara, stood before a model of the forest made from plastic and ink. He traced a finger along the map and frowned. "They're letting a boy stop progress," he scoffed. A junior officer replied nervously. "There's been strange activity reported. The villagers say the forest moved. That animals attacked the site." Kura laughed. "You believe that nonsense?" "No, sir. But we've lost 3 bulldozers. They were torn apart. And the last crew won't return." Bakara narrowed his eyes. "Then we'll go ourselves." Back in the village, Arden continued his work. Rimba often watched from the trees, offering guidance when needed, but always letting Arden lead. It was the boy's voice the forest now followed. Not because he commanded it, but because he listened when no one else had. One morning, while walking near the older part of the woods, Arden felt a change. The wind had shifted. The ground was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the same silence he had felt once before the chainsaws came. He placed his hand on the bark of a tree and closed his eyes. Distant footsteps, heavy, calculated. He turned. Rimba appeared behind him. "They're coming again," the monkey said. "Different men?" Arden asked. Rimba nodded. "Not villagers. Outsiders. From the city." Arden's breath caught. "Then they don't know." "They don't care," Rimba corrected. Arden ran back to the village. The elders gathered quickly when he called. Grandmother Sari sat at the front, wrapped in her old scarf, her eyes tired but sharp. "They won't stop," Arden said. They're coming with more machines. Mr. Darmo, now quiet in his role as one of the council, clenched his jaw. We turned them away once. We can do it again. They're not like us, Arden warned. They won't listen. What will the forest do if they attack? Mira asked, her voice trembling. No one answered. By sunset they arrived. 5 black trucks rolled into the edge of the village, engines rumbling like thunder. Men stepped out, some with cameras, some with clipboards, others with sharp metallic tools that looked more like weapons than farming equipment. Bakara walked at the front, dressed not for the forest but for a courtroom, eyes scanning the land with cold calculation. He approached the villagers gathered at the edge of the fields and smiled, tight-lipped. We're here to inspect land damage and claim our equipment, he said. Mr. Darmo stepped forward. The machines are gone. The forest took them. I'm sure it did, Bakara said mockingly. Now step aside. Arden stepped between them. You shouldn't go in there, he said. The forest doesn't want you. Bakara raised an eyebrow. You must be the famous boy. What's your name? Arden. Well, Arden, Bakara said, kneeling slightly. I don't take orders from children. And I certainly don't believe in fairy tales. Behind him, his men began unloading tools. You'll regret it, Arden said. Kara stood. That's a risk I'm willing to take. He signaled, and 2 men crossed the forest line. For a few seconds nothing happened. Then, the ground shifted. From beneath the soil, roots exploded upward, thick as arms. They twisted around the men's legs and dragged them back screaming. One disappeared into the brush. The other was thrown into a tree and knocked unconscious. Baskara's eyes widened. More roots rose. The sky darkened, though no clouds had gathered. Birds shrieked overhead. And from deep within the forest, a low growl rose. Not from one beast, but from hundreds. Wolves, panthers, boars. Even the wind joined, howling through the trees like an ancient chorus. Bakara backed away, tripping over his own feet. Arden stepped forward. I tried to warn you. He turned to the villagers. No one must ever bring machines here again. Mr. Darmo nodded. We will protect it. Bakara fled. His trucks reversing out of the village, tires tearing through the soil in panic. His men followed, shaken and silent. By the time the sun set completely, the forest was quiet again. But something had changed. It wasn't just the villagers who had seen the forest's power now. The outside world would hear of it. There would be stories, maybe even fear. And Arden knew. This was not the end. It was the beginning of something bigger, something deeper. The forest had chosen to fight back. Now it was Arden's turn to protect not just the trees, but the balance between 2 worlds that could no longer pretend the other did not exist. Word of the forest's uprising spread far beyond the village in less than a week. Whispers traveled along the rivers, across the rice fields, and through the narrow streets of the nearby town. Stories grew in their telling. Some said the trees had come alive, others claimed a boy had summoned animals with a single word. Journalists arrived with cameras and questions. Reporters from the city begged to interview the villagers. Drones flew overhead, trying to capture images of the dense wall of trees that now guarded the forest's edge. But no one could cross it. Not unless the forest allowed them. Arden became the name on everyone's lips. Some called him chosen. Others called him cursed. He did not respond to either. He spent his days walking the border of the forest, listening to the vibrations in the ground, the shifting moods of the air, the messages hidden in birdsong. His ears were not like those of the villagers anymore. His eyes no longer saw in the way they used to. He could sense things now. Minute changes in temperature, the presence of fear in an animal's breath, even the sadness buried deep inside certain trees. Rimba, ever quiet, remained by his side, watching closely. "You've grown," the monkey said one evening as Arden stood beneath the stars. "The forest isn't just part of you now. You're part of it." "But something feels wrong," Arden whispered. Rimba nodded. "Because the world beyond is watching, but it does not understand." The monkey pointed toward the distant hills, where city lights twinkled like cold fireflies. "They will return, but not with chainsaws or axes. This time they will come with words, with papers, with laws. And those can be even more dangerous." The next morning, 2 men in government uniforms arrived at the village. They introduced themselves with practiced smiles and small notebooks, their words smooth and full of promise. "We want to help," they said. "We believe in protecting nature." They requested a meeting with the elders. Grandmother Sari sat at the front of the council, eyes narrowed beneath her scarf. Arden stood beside her, silent but watchful. "We propose turning the forest into a protected site," said one of the officials. "A tourist reserve. We'll build observation decks, eco-friendly paths, maybe even a learning center for children." Arden remained still. "And who would control this reserve?" asked Mr. Darmo. The younger official smiled. "Why, the government, of course. But we'll work closely with the village." Mira frowned. "And the forest? What about it? It's not a zoo." The older official chuckled. "Nature belongs to all of us." Arden finally spoke. "Nature belongs to itself." The room fell silent. The 2 officials exchanged glances. "I'm afraid the law disagrees," the elder one replied. "If this forest isn't registered under national protection, we cannot guarantee its safety from future development. We've already seen what happens when people try to control it," Arden said. "We're not trying to control," the younger man said. "We're trying to organize. You've created something beautiful here, Arden. Let us help you preserve it." But Arden wasn't smiling. He could feel it again, beneath their polished words, beneath their soft voices. Greed. Not wild, open greed like the men with chainsaws had. This was different. It was patient, clean, legal, and far more dangerous. That night, Arden returned to the banyan tree and sat beneath its roots. The forest was quiet, but it did not sleep. Never did. Its dreams drifted in the wind, in the soil, in the ripples on the pond's surface. Rimba joined him, chewing on a piece of sugarcane. "They're clever," Arden said. "Yes," Rimba replied. "They always have been. That's why the forest usually avoids them." "But it chose me," Arden said. "So it must believe they can change." Rimba looked at him. "Does it matter what the forest believes? Or does it matter what you do with the voice it gave you?" Arden didn't answer right away. The next day, he invited the entire village to the forest edge. The wall of trees remained, but the opening Arden had once used now widened slightly as he approached. He stepped through alone, leaving the others behind. Inside, he wandered deeper than he had in weeks. Past the stream. Past the damaged roots now healing. Past the field of saplings. In the heart of the forest, he stopped. Then he knelt. "I need you to listen," he whispered. The wind stirred. "I don't know how to protect you from what I don't understand. I don't know the rules of their world. I only know yours. But they are coming. Not with axes but with pens. They will try to name you, to build paths through you, to put up signs and fences. They will say it's to help. But help is not always help." A rustle in the leaves. Bird called. "I want to protect you. But I am just a boy. What do I do? There was no thunderous reply, no glowing light, but a single leaf floated down and landed in Arden's palm. He looked at it. Its edges were torn, damaged, but its center was green, alive. He understood. He stood and returned to the villagers, who waited anxiously near the edge. I will speak with them, he said. But not as a child, not as a tool. He looked at the officials. I will speak as the voice of the forest. And if they do not listen, then they will feel what it feels when it is silenced again. The next meeting was held beneath the banyan tree itself. The officials brought cameras, recorders, notebooks. Arden brought nothing. He stood before them, wearing the same threadbare clothes he always had, with dirt still under his nails from that morning's planting. This forest does not need to be protected, he said. It needs to be respected. One reporter asked, but who owns this land? Arden pointed to the birds, to the deer in the distance, to the canopy above. They do. Another asked, will you allow tourists? Arden replied, will they come to learn or to take? Someone murmured that he was just a child. And yet no one interrupted him. Because even though he was small, his voice had weight. Not because of volume but because of truth. The forest had chosen him, not because he was strong, but because he listened. Because he spoke only when silence became unbearable. And now the whole world was listening. The monsoon came earlier than anyone expected. For days, the skies had turned a deep shade of gray, and the air had grown still, as if the wind itself were holding its breath. When the rain finally fell, it did not arrive gently. It poured in heavy sheets, slamming against rooftops, flooding paths, and turning the village fields into rivers of thick brown mud. Arden stood at the forest's edge, soaked to the bone, his eyes scanning the distance. Rimba clung to a branch above him, his golden fur dripping but his gaze steady. This rain is not from the sky alone, Rimba said, voice nearly drowned by the downpour. It is sorrow. The forest is mourning. Arden's heart sank. But why? We did everything we could. Rimba leapt down and landed beside him. There is still a lie buried in the soil. And lies, no matter how deep, will always grow roots. Those words haunted Arden for hours. As the village huddled indoors, trying to stay dry and warm, Arden sat beside the banyan tree in silence, listening to the storm hammer against the leaves above. The gift inside him, this strange deep connection to the forest, pulled at him, restless and uneasy. That night the dreams came again. Not like before. This time he saw fire, not from men but from within the earth itself. Roots burning from the inside. Animals running not just from fear but from betrayal. And then he saw it. His mother's face, blurred but glowing, her lips moving without sound, pointing not at the forest but at the village. Arden woke with a start, heart racing, breath shallow. He understood. The danger was not outside. It was here. Morning came but the storm did not stop. Water streamed through the village paths, washing away baskets, firewood, and any crops left on the ground. But it wasn't just the flood that frightened the villagers. It was the ground. It was shaking. Not all at once, but in pulses. Small rhythmic tremors like footsteps moving deep beneath the earth. The villagers gathered quickly in the meeting hall, their faces pale, their eyes filled with a kind of fear that no prayer could calm. The mountain, said Pak Rendi. It's never shaken like this before. It's not the mountain, Arden said, standing in the doorway, drenched and barefoot. It's something beneath us, something old. And it's waking up. What are you saying? Mr. Darmo asked. There's a root, Arden said. A single root left behind. One we never saw. One poisoned by greed. And it's growing. Rimba appeared beside him, soaked but still unbothered by the weather. The forest has been healing. But that root was left untouched. Because no one thought to look inside the village. Hush fell. Then Grandmother Sorry stood slowly. Where? Arden hesitated, then turned, and pointed toward the eastern corner of the village. Toward the home of the man who once led the machines. Mr. Darmo. They walked together through the rain-soaked paths. Mr. Darmo walked in silence, head lowered, saying nothing. His house stood quiet, its wooden door slightly open, wind pushing it gently back and forth. Inside everything looked untouched, until Arden stepped in. He walked slowly, listening, not with ears, but with the sense the forest had awakened inside him. It guided him to the back, beneath the floorboards. He knelt and began to lift the wood. Rimba helped, claws steady, silent. There, beneath the floor, was a small trunk, wrapped in plastic, hidden in earth. Arden pulled it out. The villagers watched as he opened it. Inside, blueprints, land permits, documents stamped by distant offices, plans for a luxury resort, signed contracts, Nikki, the final route. Proof that Mr. Darmo had never truly let go of his plans. Even after the forest warned him. Even after the fires, the screams, the wall of trees. The storm outside grew louder. Mr. Darmo dropped to his knees. I kept it, in case they returned, he whispered. I thought, maybe we could control it better next time. Maybe if we made peace with the companies. There is no peace in hidden greed, Grandmother Sorry said. Arden turned to her. What do? We return it, she said. Not to the men, but to the forest. They carried the trunk together. Through the pouring rain. Past the trembling trees. Toward the heart of the woods. The forest opened for them. Not wide, but enough. Enough to let them in, to test if their offering was true. They reached the center, where the trees grew in a perfect circle, where even the storm seemed to hesitate. Arden stepped forward, knelt, and placed the trunk on the ground. I offer back what was stolen, he said. What was hidden? What was wrong? He opened it, and let the rain fall inside. The ink bled. The pages melted. The signatures dissolved, and from the earth a vine grew, not twisted, not dark, clean, green, pure. It wrapped around the trunk, and pulled it underground. The shaking stopped, the air shifted. A single beam of sunlight broke through the clouds, then another, and more. The storm began to fade, the sky lightened. And in the silence that followed, a bird sang. The villagers stood in awe. Mr. Darmo wept openly, not just from shame but from release. And Arden, he closed his eyes, and felt the forest exhale. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. The wall of trees became a gate, not always open but not locked. Villagers entered with respect, not tools. Children learned to plant. Elders sang old songs under the banyan tree. And those who came from outside learned to listen or were turned away. Arden no longer needed to speak loudly, 'cause now everyone heard. And though his body was small, his spirit had grown vast, rooted in every tree, carried in every breeze. He was not just a boy. He was the voice of the forest. And the forest finally had peace. Dear listeners, from this deeply emotional story, we learn that nature is not something to be owned, exploited, or controlled as we please. Nature is a trust from aloe. It lives, breathes, and holds emotions that cannot always be explained by logic. Through the small and seemingly powerless boy named Arden, we come to realize that even someone with nothing, no family, no wealth, no voice, can become a powerful messenger of truth when their heart is pure and their intentions are sincere. We learn that greed, no matter how small, if hidden and left unchecked, will grow roots that can destroy everything. On the other hand, honesty, the courage to admit mistakes, and the willingness to change are what lead to forgiveness and healing. The forest that once raged with fury finally opened its arms again when humans humbled themselves. This story teaches us the importance of listening. Not every warning comes as a loud cry. Sometimes the most honest truths come from the silence of the wind, the quiet movement of leaves, or the eyes of a child who understands more than we think. One important reminder: this story is a work of fiction, crafted to feel real, but imagined as a tool for reflection. Though fictional, it carries meaningful messages meant to inspire, motivate, and offer life lessons that we all can relate to. It reminds us to care for the earth, to live with honesty, and to respect the life that surrounds us. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. If it touched your heart or gave you something to reflect on, please leave a comment below. Let us know which part moved you the most. Feel free to like this video as a way of showing your support. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss other meaningful and emotional stories we'll be sharing in the future. See you in the next tale. May Allah keep our hearts sincere, and our steps guided by kindness.